Hello and welcome to Tea with a Druid, number 234, which is brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. And my name is Philip Cargom, and it's a pleasure to have you watching this recording. This is pre-recorded, and I have a very special guest for you, which I will bring onto the stage right away because I can't wait to introduce you to him. Paul Powlesland. Hello, hi, how lovely to see you. Thank you for agreeing to appear on Tea with a Druid. Normally you appear in court, don't you? That's what I understand. You're a barrister, aren't you?
I am a barrister in my day job, but more recently appeared on the other side of the bench in court. Not as a defendant, as a juror, I should say.
I thought we were about to have some interesting news here. Okay. But you were in the news recently in an absolutely splendid way that I think all Druids and Druid-friendly people and nature lovers would be really interested in. Tell me about how you managed to hit the headlines recently.
I should say it was quite accidentally, and I didn't intend to hit the headlines.
Okay.
I was summoned for jury service, and I was on my way to Snaresbrook Crown Court from my boat on the River Roding, where I live, where I restore the river. And as I was going to the station, I suddenly thought, my mind was sort of thinking about the jury oath, and I suddenly thought, wait a second, I don't want to swear on the Bible or even do a civil affirmation. I want to swear on the river. And I literally turned my bike round and went back to the river and got a bottle of water from the river. Took it to court with me, took it past the security. To get water into a Crown Court, you have to sip test it, which is very risky given the current actions of Thames Water on the river. So I managed to pass that test. And as we were going into court, the usher said, who wants to swear on the Bible, who wants to affirm? And I said, I want to swear on my river. He paused. He hadn't really had that suggestion before. And then I was summoned to appear in front of the judge, who again said, we haven't had this request before, Mr. Powlesland. Can you explain? And I said, nature is effectively my God, and I hold my river to be sacred. And I have demonstrated and expressed that sacredness in my actions towards the river, in the same way a Christian might through charity. My actions on the river show my belief that the river is sacred, and it would be a meaningful promise for me. And so after some deliberation, they decided to allow it, as long as I did the affirmation as well. So definitely had all the legal boxes ticked. And a few minutes later, I managed to pour the bottle of water out into a little plastic cup they gave me, put my fingers in it, and said, I swear on the River Roding, from her source in Molehill Green to her confluence with the Thames, that I will faithfully try the defendant and give a true verdict according to the evidence. And I'd like to say that I upheld that oath, and it was really meaningful for me throughout the proceedings that I was in that case.
I find that very touching, actually. That's very beautiful and touching and meaningful, and also, I think, inspiring. I think one of the biggest problems that we face today is this feeling of disempowerment. We see the rivers being polluted, we see the nature being degraded, and we feel so helpless in the face of that. So to be able to make these gestures that are noticed and are taken note of, I think is terribly important. And of course,
it's in terms of empowerment. I've been doing direct action on the river for 7 years now, taking out tons of rubbish, planting trees, doing all the things that I can do, taking on Thames Water, all of that. But I've really come to the conclusion through that work and my work through Lawyers for Nature that unless our society begins to regard nature as somehow sacred again, then these problems will keep on happening. It's fundamentally, at least in part, a spiritual question.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because of course, somebody who isn't spiritually inclined will think, well, no, it's a practical matter and it's a legal matter and it's maybe aesthetic as well, and but I think you're so right, is that at the heart of it, it's a spiritual matter, because from your sort of philosophy, as it were, stems everything else, and so. Gosh, so many things occur to me. I want to ask you so many things. Gosh, let me just start somewhere. I lived for a couple of years in New Zealand, and I was so pleased when I think they were the first country to declare a river as grant it legal rights, as if
Not just declare that they passed an act of the New Zealand Parliament in 2017 that gave self-ownership and a guardianship body and what's called legal personhood to the Wanganui River, which is a sacred river to the Maori people. So that was the first time that's done. And one of the key things that we're aiming for in this country, because of course New Zealand has a very similar legal system, so we could do exactly the same here. We could have a right to the River Roding or a right to the River Thames, but it's a political and, dare I say, spiritual issue as to why we don't have that when New Zealand does. And of course, the crucial difference is that New Zealand has a strong indigenous people who point to the sacredness of their river and demand it. And in this country, we must fulfill that role. And we must step into that role, that relationship between humans and nature, and demand, well, firstly, demonstrate that nature is sacred, and then demand that it be given legal rights.
And your work tell us about Lawyers for Nature.
So it was initially set up to provide legal support and advice for people trying to protect rivers and trees, and we still do that. But we've realized over time that, as I've been saying, that all of these destruction of trees and rivers, you can't just firefight them on a one-by-one basis, because you'll just keep losing eventually. And they all stem from an underlying broken relationship with nature, which is that humans in this country regard nature as a dead resource to be extracted for human ends. And unless we go underneath and fix that broken relationship, the damage and destruction will just keep on happening. So we now campaign for the rights of nature and find as many different ways as possible to try and make that a reality in the current legal and political system. So we worked with a company to put nature legally on the board of their directors for the first time a few years ago. Oh, wow. Last week, I was working with some councillors in Somerset to try and put a rights of nature motion through the council. We're working with charities to put nature governance in, and doing whatever we can to bring about a new legal relationship between humans and nature.
That's wonderful, and it's so resonant for those people interested in Druidry, because of course the Druids of old were the judges. They were the judges and the lawyers. So this interest in sort of human law and natural law is absolutely fundamental and ancient. There's a sort of ancient precedent in the Brahon laws, for instance, and so on. And I know there are. I was involved in a meeting with various lawyers and historians at Exeter University, trying to promote this, following on the example from New Zealand. And I don't know whether you'd agree with this, but one of the points somebody made, we had somebody from the Department of the Environment as well, is that there's lots of legal protections in place. The problem is not that there are sort of piles of paperwork, but it's the enactment of those. It's the policing and the prosecution of them that is the problem.
Exactly that. I mean, I literally say, like, it's a testament to the failure of our current system that as the acronyms and the laws have multiplied, so have the destruction of nature. We've got acronyms coming out of our ears, and yet the destruction carries on. And ultimately, and that's why this idea of the Labour government trying to save rivers by putting a new law in place, I'm sceptical about it. We already have laws which are roundly ignored. And on my river, the Roding, there's loads of laws have been broken all the time. Like Thames Water is admittedly committing criminal offences, regularly. And I think the reason they're getting away with that is crucially because the river itself can't speak up for its own interests. And what a difference would it make if the Roding had legal personhood, if it had a body of paid guardians who are actively, constantly fighting for it and upholding its rights under the law. I think that could make a huge difference, even within the current legal framework.
Yes. So if I understand it correctly, you're working and fighting at the legal and the conceptual level, if you like, the spiritual level as well. And also in this very practical way, you said that you live on the river and the Roding, and what do you do physically in terms of activism? We're talking about
quite a lot. I mean, it's multiplied over time. I mean, the short story is that I moved to the Roding in 2017 on my boat to set up a project to restore it. I became the first person to live on the river above the creek.
Tell us, because people from all over the world watch this. So where is the river?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the Roding is London's third biggest river, after the Thames and the Lee. It flows sort of down from Stansted Airport in Essex with a little tiny trickle all the way down, kind of through the outer London suburbs in East London, and then it meets the Thames just below me in Barking. So it's quite a substantive river, but has been generally forgotten. Yeah, there's lots of other boaters that live on other rivers in London, but no one ever lived on the River Roding above the creek before. So I moved there with a sort of vague idea to set up a community project to restore it, and just started. And that's something I think is really interesting, is a lot of the time you've just got to start, because just start with the obvious stuff like, oh, there's rubbish all over the river. Well, I guess we need to pick that out, although it keeps coming back. And, oh, this bit is bare of trees, so maybe we should put some trees in there. And clearly there should be a riverside path. And as you do each thing, it kind of opens the door for the next thing that you've got to do. As a perfect example, earlier this summer, I was doing a litter pick in the river for once, got waders on to try and haul crap out of the river. And as we were doing it, a rainstorm came over, and suddenly all the road runoff drains started just pouring black filth into the river, so that we had to stop the litter pick because we couldn't even see through the water anymore. But from then I was like, oh, wait a second, as well as sewage, road runoff is a big issue. I guess we've got to start campaigning about that. And it just keeps on expanding out until you find yourself with a full-time unpaid job.
Yeah. Gosh, oh well, how amazing! And have you managed to sort of build up a team of people who help you to do this?
Yeah, I mean, it not as big as I wish it was. We have lots of volunteers, but the kind of day-to-day organisation of that is quite hard because it's unpaid. But yeah, there's a group called Friends of the River Roding Facebook group, where a lot of the organisation started, and that started with me and 20 of my mates, and is now over 2,000 people, I think.
Wow.
All around the river. People come to volunteer days, and we're trying to kind of get more people interested in doing things in their local part of the river. But yeah, I think there's something to be said for the kind of hyper-local, real, not just the river itself, but different parts of the river, and concentrating on the bits that are closest to you.
That's really good. I don't know if I found it really helpful to come across the concept of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence, which I first came across it from a chap called Stephen Covey, but I'm not sure if he came up with the idea. But I don't know if you're familiar with it. But the idea is that you identify your circle of concern, and for most of us, it's the whole world and all of humanity, and because we want to care for it and we're concerned about it. But then you realize there's a circle of influence that you have, and that's smaller. And when you don't make the distinction, that's when you get the burnout and the stress, because you can't. So you say, yes, I love everybody and I want to care for everybody and everything on the planet, but there's only so much I can do, and I'm on this river now, and I'm going to care for this.
I have a similar concept, but I call it cycling between the micro and the macro, and I think it's really important to have both. So I do very big picture stuff, campaigning for rights of nature on a national level, but I do sort of very direct work on the Roding, and I find the two really help each other. So the stuff that I learn in the big picture rights of nature stuff really helps the Roding, but also the Roding regularly gives me examples that I can use for that campaigning. For instance, when someone says, oh, well, what's wrong with the current law? I've got a dozen examples ready. I can bore you for 2 hours with examples from the Roding as to why the current legal framework is inadequate, and not in a kind of highfalutin philosophical way, but in a direct, this is why the river's getting destroyed. Here's an example. Here's another one of things that I've done, why it's inadequate. And I find that quite regularly. I think I mentioned earlier on, like about the rubbish coming back. And that's taught me that we need to address packaging as a kind of systemic thing and have a deposit return system. Sewage is like directly like that as well. When I'm talking about sewage, I can give a direct example on the Roding of criminal offences being committed, not getting prosecuted, and not getting fixed. So that shows why the system is broken. But it's also important to campaign about that system as well. Yeah, because you can't just fix things on a local level. So it's about balancing those two and cycling between them, as I would see it.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. That's really helpful. And can let's home in on that specific example, because of course, in a way, I mean, the big increase of the numbers of Liberal MPs, party MPs in the UK has been as a result of the way they focused on water purity as a campaign issue. That was their main campaign issue in the last general election. For those who aren't in Britain, they won't know this, but basically, they went, I can't remember what the stats are, but they went from having a very small number of MPs to now they've got a substantial number of MPs as a result.
Sewage was a massive issue at the last election. Yeah,
massive issue. Yeah, exactly. Is there a way, when, say, you're on your river and you identify, you saying, they keep committing criminal offences, is there a way that you can charge them or take legal action against them in the specific, for that specific event, as it were? You take photographs,
there are potentially, it's not easy. There are different ways. You could bring a private prosecution, and there's also a very helpful case that happened earlier in the year in the Supreme Court that basically said other landowners who are affected by sewage spills can still bring legal action. So there are ways, but law isn't the only way. There's also campaigning and also just practicalities. One of the things that I think is I do have sympathy with Thames Water over is the fact that nobody even knows where half of these sewage outfalls are or what is needed to fix them. So that's something we're really concentrating on the roading, is finding the answer to that question. Because if Thames Water came to me now and said, okay, you've got us, we're going to fix them all, where do you want us to start? No one actually even knows the answer to that question, which is slightly terrifying, but also needs answering. And again, that's on a very granular river per river thing. Which outfalls are polluting the worst and which need fixing?
Right. So it's a very, very specific detail where citizens groups.
So again, to go back to the micro and the macro, we need both. We need a national policy that says these shouldn't be spilling, or they in these circumstances, or they should be fixed in these circumstances, and then a very local assessment of which ones actually need fixing.
Yes. It's sort of really echoing that phrase, and think globally, act locally. Actually sort of working at both levels.
And the rights of nature trickles down. It starts from the highest international levels with the crime of ecocide and goes right down to the specific measuring and a specific outfall. Is that putting sewage in, and what do we do about that?
Yes. How fantastic. There's so much to talk about. We'll have to do another one of these. I'm aware of the time.
Practical guide for how Druids can get involved in river restoration, maybe.
Yes, because one of the things we do in the Druid work is, obviously Druidry is a nature spirituality that encourages us to really connect with nature and treasure it and love it, and to feel ourselves not as at one with nature, as it were. And then one of the things we do fairly early on in the training is invite people to identify what it is, what aspect of nature they feel that really touches them in their hearts. And for lots of people, it'll be water, and it was World Rivers Day last week, so it's lovely that we're talking about this now. It'll be water. For other people, it'll be sort of air quality. For other people, soil, or a particular plant species that's endangered, or animal species, and so on. So, why do you think for you? Do you know? Is there a reason why it's water that particularly touches you and makes you want to throw your energy into it?
It's interesting. I mean, I feel like I have always been drawn to, even as a kid, I was very drawn to rivers. But in my adult life, I think the key thing was living on a boat, because it's just you're spending time like almost in water. You're suspended on it. And I think so much of nature connection and the desire to protect and restore nature is actually first having that deep connection, which comes from knowledge, which leads to love, which leads to a desire to protect. And that for me, I'm in and on the river roading all the time. How can I not love it? And if I love it, how can I not have a desire to protect it? It just flows. It just flows, doesn't it?
It flows, doesn't it? And
it flows. And actually, all of those things, I'm not going to pretend that all the work that I and other volunteers do on the river is easy. A lot of it is very hard and dispiriting, and sometimes, but it's also, that is in itself the work that has connected me to the river. So I guess this is me trying to say that depending on how you think about it, pulling mud-covered rubbish out of a river, is that a spiritual exercise? I think it might be. Both in terms of our spiritual duty towards nature, but also connecting deeper to nature as part of a spiritual practice.
There's something, yes, and there's something very beautiful about, well, really profound about, of course, at a symbolic level, but I think it echoes in the psyche about clearing the channels, clearing the rubbish. That you're doing that not just for yourself, but for others and for the world and for nature. And that's tremendous.
And also the other key principle is not just cleaning, I think, can be dispiriting, but also enriching life. That's my ultimate, guiding principle for the river, but also I think one of my key spiritual principles. That's what I believe that humans are on earth to do. We are a keystone species who, through our actions, enrich life. And that is the most noble pursuit. Have you come to earth and enriched life? And to be able to do that on a very grassroots basis is such a joy and such a pleasure, as hard as some of the individual actions within it are. And it's interesting, you had at the start one of my favorite quotes about a person who plants a tree whose shade they will never sit under. I love that quote, but I also think you can go another thing and say that actually maybe even not necessarily above that, but another stage to that is planting a tree whose shade you will definitely get to enjoy, and actually sitting back. And I've got willow trees that I planted and I've been able to climb and put a hammock under, and that's also a great pleasure.
That's huge, isn't it? It's lovely. There's one of my favorite spots is in Wellington, New Zealand. There's a little road called Holloway Road in the city, and you walk. It's a cul-de-sac. And you get to the end of the street and there's a little park, and you go in and it's a creek with a little river in it, a little stream in it. And it's absolutely magical. It's very pretty. It's got beautiful plants in it. Occasionally you can see it's been used for ceremony. There'll be a little sort of dream catcher or something hanging from a tree. And when Stephanie and I first found it, we really enjoyed visiting it. And we asked people that this place feels very magical and beautiful. What is it? And the story was that it was a sacred site for the Maori. And then, when what do you call them? Colonizers started living there and so on. They basically used it as a place to chuck rubbish. And about 20 years ago or something, the people living in Holloway Road thought, hang on a minute, this is crazy. And they all got together and they cleared the rubbish out. And it's now this magical spot. And so it's very, very beautiful, that enriching thing, and in their own lifetime.
And you can find those anywhere. Where I live, I'm maybe because I haven't described it in that much detail, people think it's some kind of rural idyll. It's in the heart of kind of post-industrial East London. I'm within 100 meters of tower blocks, warehouses, a motorway. Like, it's really challenging. And yet in the midst of it, there's real wild beauty. And I think trying to create spaces for spiritual connection with nature in the midst of that is a kind of noble pursuit, hopefully.
It is. That's wonderful. And creating beauty and clearing away and entering. You talked about entering the flow, living on the river and just being in the flow of the river. Because of course, if one believes in subtle energy or one's energy field, are you actually on a boat? Do you live on a boat?
Yeah, I've lived on a boat for 12 years.
Yeah. So if you can imagine
in a marsh on the Roding.
Yes, if you imagine the energy of that river, whether you want to conceive that poetically or actually in some sort of subtle form, it's flowing through you as you sleep on that. This energy is flowing through you. So now let's drop into a meditation. Before we do that, let me ask, is there a sort of web, if people are intrigued by what you do and the Lawyers for Nature and so on, is there a website or
there's various. We're across all different channels. So there's at River Roding or at Paul Powlesland on Twitter. There's lawyersfornature.com or riverrodingtrust.org for websites, or Friends of the River Roding on Facebook if if you're in London and want to come on any volunteer days this winter, then please do join us for that.
Great. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. Would you like to lead us in a meditation on?
Well, so some of my version of meditating, I do genuinely find sort of getting into doing hard physical work and getting into a flow state on the river to be a form of my main form of meditation. So, picking out rubbish is actually quite meditative, or like, chopping brambles or creating paths is actually quite meditative. So unfortunately, because I'm in my office, I can't really do that form of meditation. Although I do really recommend it to anyone. Just try and see how you feel about nature, action for nature meditation, if that ever is available to you. In the meantime, I'm happy for you to lead a meditation for us.
Oh, well, thank you, Paul. Action for nature meditation. That's. Let's really take that on board. And yes, action for nature meditation. That's beautiful. Thank you. Oh, well, so let's just take a few moments, because in every Tea with a Druid we have a few moments of just dropping into a meditation. And I'll bring you back at the end, Paul, but to save you having to, I'll do that. Okay, so now let's just being aware of being seated in front of your screen, the four walls around you, the ceiling above you, the floor below you. Just take a moment you might like to lower your eyes or even close your eyes. That magical act, suddenly millions of bits of information stop traveling to your brain. Something happens, magic. And ask yourself how you know that you're in your room. Well, you know you're in the room because you are in the room, but you can't really sense it. Or can you? Can you sense the walls? Can you sense the floor beneath you, the ceiling above you? Just allow yourself to at least imagine you can sense them around you. And then just for fun, imagine them just gently falling away as you find yourself beside a little riverbank. And it's a lovely day. It's warm, just the perfect weather that you like. And there's a punt, they're one of those punts. If you don't know what they are, they're sort of flat-bottomed boats that are propelled by somebody standing at one end with a pole, and they just gently drop it in the water, and you glide silently almost along the river. And it's all prepared for you with a lovely cushion and mattress and all the rest of it. So cushions and stuff. So you can just, if you want to, and if you feel right, you might like to lie down in the punt and just lie there, and somebody's very kindly agreed to punt you along. And you just feel, that feeling of the boat when it just drifts away from the bank. Just that moment of sort of disconnection from the land. Oh, here we go. And we're drifting out into the middle of the stream. And just starting to go downstream. Just a wonderful feeling of flow. And as you look up, and you may be somebody who sees things clearly in your mind, or you may not see stuff, but you can just sort of imagine it and just sense it. Just seeing the sunlight dappling through the leaves as you flow down the river. Just sensing this flow. And it's coming down the river and coming to a bend in the river. And as it comes around, you see a little party of people working on the riverbank. And the person who's punting you just actually eases the punt in. And again, you have that feeling of connecting back to the bank. And you get off the boat, and some people welcome you over, and they say, hey, do you want to help us? And they're clearing, and you see that they're picking rubbish out of the bushes. They're chopping down some brambles. There's a big old skip in just a bit further away where they're throwing the stuff, which is going to be taken away. And you find this is so unexpected, but you find, gosh, yes, of course. And you start to help them, just carrying stuff, throwing stuff in the skip. Somebody comes up to you and presents you with some waders. You know, there's things like Wellington boots, but they go right up really high so you don't get wet. And they say, hey, do you want to try this? And you put the waders on, and somebody helps you, takes you by the arm so you're not slipping. You gradually walk down the side of the bank, and you get into the river. And they give you some nice big, thick gloves, thick rubber gloves, so your hands are protected. And they say, look down there, and you see there's something. What is it? An old metal chair, something like that. And you can just pull. You just give it a tug, and it dislodges. And you hand it up to somebody who's on the riverbank. And there's this wonderful feeling of camaraderie, and you're all doing something that feels really wholesome and good. You're clearing this stuff out of the river. And it's as if, as you're working physically like this, pulling this stuff out of the river, there's more stuff now that you can pull out. It's almost as if you can feel the river sighing, feel the river thanking you, feel the river. It's not even personal in that way. It's just this feeling of flow, and it's just this, you know, it feels good. Clearing, and again, pulling up some old thing out of the river. It's all dripping with mud and stuff, and you hand it across to your newfound friend on the riverbank. And they chuck it with a bang into the skip, like that. And then somebody calls out, and you see that they've made a picnic. So you take a break from working, and you sit down. Somebody's laid out a cloth, and there is food and fruit, stuff to drink. You're sitting in the sun, and you look around, and you start to see the riverbank and the trees in a new way. It's starting to come alive for you. You've engaged with it. You've actually been with it, and it's alive for you now. And you are closer to it. Somebody's lit a little tiny little fire, just a few little twigs that they've lit. And somebody and you're invited to sit around this little fire by the riverbank, and just to sit together in a circle. You look around the circle, and then you just feel moved to stretch out your hand to either side of you. So you take the hand of the person to your left and your right, and you close your eyes, and you feel this interesting feeling of being together. You're still unique. You're still a unique person sitting here, but you're also part of a family, a tribe, a group of people, a community. You feel that solidarity and that connection. Purposeful love, purposeful connection. At one with the group, open to the sky and open to the earth. And you feel the energy of the earth bringing you a sense of grounding and stability. You breathe in the energy of the sky. The energy of the sky meets the energy of the earth within the center of your being. And you feel calm, connected. May this earth be blessed. May all our lives be blessed. May all life be blessed. You could give a little squeeze to the hands to either side of you. You lower your hands so that your palms are touching the earth now. And you feel your love for the earth. May the earth be protected. May the land be blessed. You imagine your hands moving up now to your heart. You place your hands on your heart, and you might want to do that physically. And as you do that, you start to feel the warmth from your hands flowing into your body. And the warmth in your heart gradually spreads through your body, so you feel your whole body now warm and at peace. And as you become aware of your body, your awareness of being seated in the circle beside the river gently begins to fade as you become aware of being fully present in your body here and now, seated in front of your screen. The floor beneath you, the ceiling above you, and the walls around you. And when you feel ready, you stretch your fingers and toes and open your eyes. So there we go.
I'm glad we did that before. After the interview, I feel too relaxed to give any kind of cogent answers right now.
Well, lovely. Thank you, Paul, so much for coming on Tea with the Druid, and let's do some more things together, because I think what you're doing is so fantastic, and so aligned with what Druids around the world are doing. A few years back, I sent out a sort of message to everybody saying what environmental projects you engaged in, and the amount of projects that came back were just fantastic from all over the world in all sorts of domains. So that's fantastic, and
really the people out there already doing it a lot of the time.
Yes,
doing the work. Yeah,
exactly. So you stay there, and in the meanwhile, thank you to everybody for watching, and see you again next week. And thank you, Paul, for coming along.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye. So now I will finish, and much love, many blessings to everybody, and see you next week.